They say that the people who can hurt you the most are the ones you love the deepest. And I guess I never really understood what that meant until the day my mother looked me in the eye and said, "You're not welcome at your dad's birthday party." My name is Olivia. I'm 28, and I've always been a daddy's girl. I was the kid who'd wait by the front door at 6 p.m. just to be the first to hug him when he came home from work. I was the kid who wanted to learn how to change a tire and patch drywall, because that meant spending Saturdays in the garage with him learning things while the radio played in the background. Even when I moved from Denver to Chicago to chase my career as a financial advisor, my dad was the one I called when the world felt too heavy, when I got my first promotion, when my car made a weird noise. My dad, Robert, wasn't just my father. He was my safe place. The steady, gentle presence in a family that often felt like it was made of glass, always one harsh word away from cracking. And maybe that's why when he had a minor heart attack last year, I didn't hesitate. I packed a bag, told my boss I needed a few weeks, and flew home to help him recover. We spent those weeks cooking together, going on slow neighborhood walks, and watching old movies he loved. Every time he looked at me and said, "Thank you, Liv," I felt like I was exactly where I was meant to be. During one of those afternoons, sitting on the porch with tea in hand, he told me about his lifelong dream. One day he said, looking out at the sunset, "I'd love to see where my grandfather came from in Tuscany. I've read about it, but seeing it, walking those streets, that would be something, wouldn't it?" I saw something in his eyes when he said it, a quiet longing, a dream he'd tucked away between bills and responsibilities, a wish he never really thought would happen. And in that moment, I made a silent promise to myself I would make it happen. So I did what I do best. I planned. For 2 years, I skipped fancy brunches cooked at home and turned down weekend trips with friends so I could tuck away every spare dollar. By the time my dad's 60th birthday was around the corner, I had saved up $56, $300 enough to give him a gift that truly meant something. I planned every detail meticulously. I found a villa in Tuscany, with a vineyard that stretched to the horizon and a kitchen where we could learn to make pasta the way his grandmother did. I researched the village where his grandfather Antonio was born and found distant cousins who still lived there, running a small olive grove that had been in the family for generations. I even called the town hall in that village to see if they had any old records we could see, and the elderly woman on the phone clapped her hands and said in her thick Italian accent, "We will welcome your papa home." Every email confirmation, every plan, every little piece of this trip felt like another layer of love I could give to the man who had given me everything. 6 months before his birthday, I pitched the idea during a family dinner. I remember the way Dad's eyes lit up, how he looked like a little kid on Christmas morning. "Italy? Really? Live." "You'd do that for me, Tyler." My older brother smiled and nodded, and even his wife Rebecca chimed in about the wine tastings she had always dreamed of. My mom, Caroline, was quiet at first, then asked practical questions about the flights and the cost. I took that as cautious approval. I left that dinner believing we were all on the same page, that for once we were aligned in giving Dad something that would matter for the rest of his life. Looking back, maybe I should have noticed the way her smile didn't quite reach her eyes that night. The months that followed were a blur of planning. I turned my apartment into mission control, with Tuscany maps pinned to the walls and Italian phrase books on every surface. I would text Dad pictures of the villa, and he'd text back excitedly with broken Italian phrases, trying to learn how to say thank you and hello and beautiful. He was so excited, and I was so certain this would be the best gift I could ever give him. Until the Tuesday I showed up at my parents' house. I had come over with fresh pastries from Dad's favorite bakery, ready to go over final details before booking flights. My mom opened the door, and I barely had a chance to say hello before she gave me that look, the one she reserved for moments she wanted to remind me of exactly where I stood in this family. "We need to talk," she said, her voice calm, almost casual. She led me into the kitchen where Tyler and Rebecca were already sitting, avoiding eye contact. I remember placing the pastry box on the counter, confused as my mother folded her arms and leaned against the sink. "We've all agreed," she said, her voice like ice. "You're not welcome at your dad's birthday party." For a moment, the world went quiet. I could hear the hum of the refrigerator, the clock ticking on the wall, the blood pounding in my ears. What I managed to whisper. She tilted her head, a small, satisfied smirk on her lips. You've taken over everything, Olivia. You're always making everything about you and your plans. We've decided to do something simpler for your father's birthday. You're not invited." My eyes darted to Tyler, who looked down at the floor, and Rebecca, who shifted uncomfortably in her seat, refusing to meet my gaze. I felt like I couldn't breathe. This trip, this dream, this gift of love, it was never about me. It was for Dad, for the man who had held my hand through every scraped knee, who had shown up for every softball game, who had believed in me when I didn't believe in myself. And now I was being told I wasn't welcome at the one celebration that mattered. I tried to speak, to say something, anything, but the words caught in my throat. My mother simply turned away as if the conversation was over, as if I was nothing more than an inconvenience to be dismissed. I walked out of that house with the pastry box still in my hand, my fingers numb around the cardboard, my vision blurry with tears. I refused to let fall until I was alone in my car. I sat there in the driveway staring at the home that had once been my safe place, the place where I learned to ride a bike, where Dad taught me how to fix a leaky faucet, where we had spent Christmas mornings in pajamas by the fire. And in that moment, I realized that everything was changing. That sometimes the people you love the most are the ones who can hurt you the deepest. And I knew one thing for certain: this wasn't over. Because no matter what it took, no matter how much it hurt, I would find a way to make sure my dad knew the truth. That he would know that I loved him enough to fight for the one dream he thought he could never have. And maybe, just maybe, I would find out who I was meant to be along the way. If you grew up with a parent who made you feel like you were never enough, you'll understand this. I learned early on that some people are impossible to please, no matter how hard you try, how high you jump, or how many times you swallow your feelings just to keep the peace. For me, that person was my mother. My brother Tyler and I are 4 years apart. From the moment he took his first steps, he was the golden child. The family photo albums don't lie, page after page of Tyler's soccer games, Tyler's straight A report cards, Tyler's science fair trophies, all with my mother's proud smile front and center. Me, I was the one holding the camera half the time, or standing off to the side, trying to figure out how to be enough to get that same smile from her. But I never did. I can't tell you how many times I heard the words, "Why can't you be more like your brother?" It became the soundtrack of my childhood. Tyler always seemed perfect. He was captain of the soccer team valedictorian, and later the law school superstar. He had a way of making everything look easy, and maybe it was for him. For me, it felt like every achievement was measured against his shadow. But while my mother compared and criticized, there was one person who never did: my dad. Robert Walsh was the kind of dad who showed up not just physically, but with his whole heart. He was the one who stayed up late with me before a big test, quizzing me with flashcards, even when he had an early morning meeting. He was the one who taught me how to drive, never raising his voice, even when I stalled the car on a hill and panicked. He was the one who slipped silly, encouraging notes into my lunchbox, when I was 12 notes like, "You're a rock star," with a little doodle of a stick figure with a guitar. He was the reason I didn't give up, when it felt like nothing I did was enough for my mother. He was my safe place in a house that often felt cold, the warmth in a family that always seemed a little too perfect on the outside. When I graduated from Northwestern with my degree in finance, I remember calling my dad first. I was shaking with excitement, telling him about the job offer I got from Meridian Financial Group. He whooped so loudly that I had to pull the phone away from my ear, and when I got home, he had a small cake waiting with the words, "Congrats, Liv," scrawled in messy frosting. My mother's reaction: she nodded and said, "That's nice, honey. Did you know Tyler just made partner at his firm?" That was my mother in a sentence. No matter what I achieved, there was always something else. Someone else to remind me that I wasn't quite enough. But I stopped trying to win her approval a long time ago. Instead, I focused on building a life that made me proud. I moved to Chicago, got promoted to senior financial advisor before I turned 27, and made a small apartment feel like home, with thrifted furniture plants on every windowsill and shelves full of books I read late at night after long days at work. I was proud of the life I built for myself, but no matter how busy I got, no matter how far I moved, my bond with my dad never changed. We called each other every Sunday. He'd ask about my clients even though he barely understood half the finance jargon, and I'd listen to him talk about his students at the university. the engineering projects that made him light up. Sometimes he'd share recipes he was trying, insisting I needed to learn how to make a proper stew, and I'd laugh, telling him I was surviving off instant noodles and coffee. It was during one of those calls about a year after his heart attack that he mentioned Italy again. You know, Liv, he said, a smile in his voice, I was reading about Tuscany last night. Did you know there's a small village where your great-grandfather was born, Castellina? I'd love to see it someday. The way he said it so soft, like he was afraid to want it too much, settled into my heart and wouldn't leave. I started looking up flights that night, searching for villas in Tuscany, reading about small olive groves and vineyards that stretched into the horizon. It became my secret mission, the thing that kept me going when work was hard, when the city felt too loud, when I missed home. I made a plan I would save enough to take my dad on the trip of his dreams for his 60th birthday. It wasn't easy. I said no to weekend trips with friends, skipped fancy brunches, cut out my daily coffee runs, and made cheap drip coffee at home. I learned to cook simple meals instead of ordering takeout, tracked every expense, and transferred every extra dollar into a separate savings account I named Dad's Italy trip. There were nights I'd come home exhausted, dropping my bag by the door, and I'd look at the Tuscany map pinned to my wall and remind myself why I was doing this. 2 years. That's how long it took. 2 years of saving, of planning, of researching the perfect places. By the time I checked my account and saw the number $56 or $300, I felt like I could finally exhale. It wasn't just about the money. It was about what it represented, a chance to give my dad something he had given me my whole life, a reminder that dreams are worth fighting for, that love shows up even when it's hard. I could already picture it, my dad standing in the middle of a vineyard, the Italian sun lighting up his face as he tasted wine, made from grapes grown on the same land his grandfather once walked. I imagined us taking a cooking class together, laughing as we tried to roll pasta by hand, him mispronouncing Italian phrases with that determined smile of his. I saw us walking the cobbled streets of Castellina, finding the small church where our family once gathered, touching the stone walls that had seen generations come and go. Every time I pictured those moments, I felt a warmth that made every sacrifice worth it. When I finally told my dad about the plan during a family dinner 6 months before his birthday, I watched the way his eyes widened, how he looked at me with a mixture of disbelief and joy. Italy. For my birthday, he asked, his voice cracking just a little. For your birthday, I confirmed, trying not to cry in front of everyone. We're going to see where our family came from. He hugged me so tightly that I could barely breathe, and for that moment, it felt like everything was exactly how it was meant to be. I didn't know then that everything I had worked so hard for, everything I had planned, was about to be ripped away with a single sentence from the person I had spent my entire life trying to understand. I didn't know that the mother who had always kept me at a distance would look at me one Tuesday afternoon and say words that would shatter the dream I had spent 2 years building. You're not welcome at your dad's birthday party. It was like a knife straight through the heart. But in that moment, I made a promise to myself, even as the world around me crumbled. This was not over. Because some dreams are worth fighting for. Some love is worth fighting for. And no matter what it took, I would find a way to keep that promise to my dad. Have you ever felt the air shift around you, like the people you love are quietly closing doors you didn't even know existed? That's what it felt like when I started noticing the way my family changed after I announced the Italy trip for Dad's birthday. At first, it was small things, little things that you tell yourself you're imagining. My text to Tyler about flight options would go unanswered for days, and when he did reply, it was always short. Sounds good, or whatever you think. No questions, no excitement, just cold politeness that made me feel like I was talking to a stranger. Mom stopped picking up my calls and would text me back hours later with one-liners like "busy talk later." When I stopped by to drop off brochures or show them the villa I'd found, she'd open the door, smile tight, and say, "Oh, I forgot you were coming by," before letting her bridge club or Bible study friends shuffle past me into the house. I kept telling myself it was nothing. People get busy. People get distracted. Maybe I was reading too much into it because I was so excited for the trip. But there was something else, a tension in the air every time I mentioned Italy. Dad would smile, asking questions about the pasta-making class or the vineyard tours, his eyes lighting up as he practiced phrases like buongiorno and grazie. But every time he did, Mom would change the subject, asking if he'd checked the mailbox or reminding him about a doctor's appointment that she had suddenly remembered. Even Rebecca, who usually texted me pictures of outfits she was planning for vacations, was oddly quiet about the trip. She would give me polite, non-committal encouragement. Sounds lovely, and then go silent. It was like everyone had collectively agreed to step away from something I had spent 2 years building. I told myself I was being paranoid, that I was overthinking, that they were just busy. But deep down, I felt it. The distance growing. The whispers I couldn't hear. The plans I wasn't a part of. One day, about 3 months before Dad's birthday, Mom texted me asking if I could come over to talk about the birthday plans. My heart leapt with relief. Finally, I thought we're going to sort out flights and finalize dates. Finally, they're getting excited with me. I stopped at Dad's favorite bakery on the way, picking up fresh pastries so we could snack while we planned. It was one of those crisp spring mornings that hinted at summer, the kind of day that makes you feel hopeful, like good things are about to happen. When I pulled up, I saw Tyler's car already in the driveway. That was unusual. Tyler lived across town and rarely dropped by unannounced. I told myself it was a good sign. Maybe he wanted to surprise me to show that he was finally on board with the trip. I balanced the pastry box in my arms and knocked, waiting for Mom to swing open the door with that welcoming smile she gave guests, the one I was always chasing. But when she opened the door, her face was blank, unreadable, and she simply stepped aside to let me in. "Thanks for coming," she said, turning and walking toward the kitchen without another word. My stomach tightened. In the kitchen, Tyler and Rebecca were already seated at the table. Rebecca gave me a small, tight smile, but Tyler didn't look up, pretending to scroll through something on his phone. I placed the pastries on the counter, trying to keep my voice light. "I brought these for us while we plan." No one moved to open the box. Mom took a deep breath, folding her hands in front of her, and leaned against the counter. "Olivia, we've been talking," she started, her tone flat, almost rehearsed. I glanced at Tyler, then at Rebecca, but neither met my eyes. Mom continued, "We think it would be better if we kept your father's birthday celebration simple this year. Simple." The word echoed in the silence of the kitchen, bouncing off the walls and landing in my chest like a stone. I don't understand," I said, my voice catching. "We've been planning this trip for months. Dad's been so excited." Mom's lips pressed into a thin line. "Your father is 60, Olivia. Not 16. An international trip is too much for him." "That's not true," I protested, feeling my heart start to pound. "He wants this. He's been practicing Italian. He talks about it all the time." Tyler finally looked up, his face unreadable. "Liv, we've decided to do something local. A party here with family and friends." I repeated, my voice getting sharper. "You decided without me." Rebecca shifted uncomfortably, looking down at her hands. Mom straightened, her eyes cold, her tone sharp. "You've taken over everything, Olivia. You always have to be in control, always have to make it about you. This trip was your idea, your plan, your obsession. We're choosing what's best for your father." I felt like the floor had disappeared beneath me. The world tilted, and I gripped the edge of the counter to steady myself. "This isn't about me," I whispered. "This was never about me. This is for Dad." Mom's eyes flashed, and then it came, the words that would shatter everything. "You're not welcome at your dad's birthday party." It felt like the world stopped moving. The hum of the refrigerator, the ticking of the clock, the faint traffic sounds outside, all of it went silent. I looked at her, searching for some sign that she was joking, that this was a cruel misunderstanding, that at any moment she would laugh and say, "I'm just kidding, Liv." But she didn't. Her eyes were hard, her mouth set, and the smirk that appeared small, satisfied, broke something deep inside me. I turned to Tyler, begging him with my eyes to say something, to stand up, to stop this. But he looked away. Rebecca's eyes were glossy, but she said nothing. And just like that, I realized I was alone in a room full of people who were supposed to love me. Without a word, I grabbed the pastry box I had brought, holding it like a shield, and walked out of the kitchen, out of the house, out of the life I had been trying so hard to be a part of. No one stopped me. No one called my name. No one came after me. When I got into my car, I sat there, the box still on my lap, and let the tears fall hot and silent as I looked at the house that was supposed to be my home, the family that was supposed to be my safe place. I thought about my dad, about the dream I had worked so hard to give him, about the way his eyes lit up when he talked about Italy. And I thought about how he didn't even know what was happening behind his back. Because the worst part wasn't that they were excluding me. The worst part was that they were taking away something that wasn't theirs to take. And in that moment, as the tears dried on my cheeks and the morning turned to afternoon, I made a promise to myself. This wasn't over. They could try to shut me out. They could try to rewrite the narrative. But I wouldn't let them erase me or the love I had for my father. I would find a way to make sure he knew the truth. Because some dreams are worth fighting for, and some love is too powerful to be silenced. I wish I could tell you that I walked away from that house with my head held high, that I left with dignity, certain of who I was and what I deserved. But the truth is, I drove home that day with tears streaming down my face, blurring the streets of my childhood into a watercolor of heartbreak. I got home, set the pastry box on the counter, and stood in the middle of my kitchen, frozen, replaying her words over and over. "You're not welcome at your dad's birthday party." Each time they echoed in my mind, they cut deeper, like paper cuts you don't notice until you're bleeding. That night, I sat on my balcony overlooking the Chicago skyline, wrapped in a blanket, even though it wasn't cold, watching the blinking city lights, while my mind replayed every moment of the past 2 years. Every coffee I skipped to save money, every late-night planning session, every text from Dad asking, "How do you say thank you in Italian again?" Every piece of that dream I had built for him was now ashes in my hands. I opened my laptop and stared at the reservation emails. The villa in Tuscany, the cooking class, the vineyard tour, the tickets to Florence. Each confirmation felt like a promise I couldn't keep anymore. My hands shook as I opened the banking app and transferred the $56,300 back from the Italy trip account into my general savings, watching the numbers change with a cold finality that made me feel like I was betraying him. It was done, I told myself. They didn't want me there. They didn't want the trip. And I wasn't going to fight for people who didn't want me. I blocked Mom's number first, then Tyler's, then Rebecca's. The silence felt like the only control I had left. Days turned into a week, and I went through the motions, getting up for work, taking client calls, attending meetings, smiling when I had to, nodding at the right moments. But inside, I felt hollow, like someone had scooped out the part of me that believed family was worth fighting for. It was on the 8th day of silence that I got the call. It was 1:17 a.m. when my phone rang, buzzing on the nightstand, dragging me out of a restless sleep. I saw Tyler's name on the screen, and for a moment, I almost declined it. But something in me said, "Answer it." Liv. His voice was breathless, shaky the way it used to sound when we were kids, and he had gotten hurt but didn't want to admit it. "What do you want, Tyler?" I said, my voice flat, exhausted. "Please don't hang up. I need to tell you something. You need to know the truth." I stayed silent, but I didn't hang up. He took a deep breath on the other end, and I could hear the tremor in his voice as he began. "Mom lied to us, Liv. She lied to all of us." I sat up in bed, clutching the phone so tightly my knuckles turned white. "What are you talking about? She told Dad you refused to come to the party, that you didn't want to be there for his birthday, that you said the trip was more important to you than family." I felt the world tilt, a wave of nausea rolling through me. "What she told me and Rebecca, that you were trying to control everything, that you wanted to exclude everyone else, that you made the trip so expensive, so none of us could come, and you could have Dad to yourself." I closed my eyes, pressing my free hand to my mouth to stifle the sob that threatened to break free. "She told Dad you didn't want to celebrate him unless it was on your terms?" Tyler's voice cracked. "He thinks you don't care, Liv. He thinks you abandoned him." Tears spilled down my cheeks, hot and relentless, as the truth unfolded, a brutal clarity that made every moment of confusion snap into place. "She intercepted your emails." Tyler continued, his words tumbling out, now desperate. "She deleted your texts from Dad's phone when he left it charging. She told him you were too busy with work to talk about plans." Dad didn't know, Liv. He didn't know. I let out a choked sound, something between a cry and a gasp, as the betrayal sank in. The woman who raised me, who had spent my entire life reminding me I wasn't enough, had stolen this from me. From him. She told everyone her version, Tyler said quietly. We all believed her. I believed her. His words were heavy with guilt, and for the first time I heard my brother, not the perfect polished Tyler everyone saw, but the boy who used to sneak cookies to me under the table when Mom wasn't looking. I'm so sorry, Liv, he whispered. I should have questioned it. I should have asked you directly. I didn't want to believe you would do that, but she made it sound so believable. I wiped my face with the back of my hand, trying to catch my breath, trying to process the weight of what he was saying. How did you find out I managed to ask my voice raw? Dad found one of the brochures you left at the house tucked in a drawer in Mom's desk. He asked her about it and she couldn't keep her story straight. Then he confronted me, and I realized none of it made sense. I could hear him swallow on the other end. He's devastated, Liv. He thought you didn't care. He's been sitting in his office every night looking at pictures of Tuscany, thinking you didn't want him anymore. The image of my father alone in his office, staring at photos of the trip we were supposed to take, broke me in a way I didn't know I could break. I need to see him, I said, my voice trembling. He wants to see you, Liv Tyler said. Please, don't shut him out. He didn't know. I nodded, forgetting for a moment that he couldn't see me. Okay, I whispered. Okay. We ended the call, and I sat there in the dark, the glow of the city outside my window, a sharp contrast to the storm inside me. My mother had stolen something precious from me, from him, from all of us. But as the dawn began to break, painting the sky in soft pinks and oranges, I felt something else rising inside me. Resolve. This wasn't over. I wouldn't let her lies be the last word. I got up, washed my face, and looked at myself in the mirror. My eyes were swollen, my hair a mess, but there was something steady in my reflection, a quiet strength that came from knowing the truth. I picked up my phone, unblocked Dad's number, and typed out a message. Dad, I need to see you, please. I pressed send, and for the first time in weeks, I felt like I could breathe, because now he would know the truth, because now I could fight for us, and because some love is too powerful to be silenced. They say the truth will set you free, but no one tells you how heavy it feels when it first lands in your hands. The morning after Tyler called, I drove to Uncle Patrick's lakeside cabin, the place Dad had retreated to when he couldn't stand to be in that house anymore. It was a crisp morning, the lake still under a soft layer of mist, the air smelling like pine and damp wood. I stepped out of the car, my hands shaking as I clutched the coffee I had picked up on the way. It felt strange walking up that familiar gravel path, remembering summers we spent here when I was a kid, fishing with Dad, roasting marshmallows by the fire, telling ghost stories under the stars. Now I was here for a different kind of story, one I never imagined we would have to tell each other. I found Dad sitting at the edge of the dock, his shoulders hunched, his reflection rippling on the water below. His hair looked grayer than I remembered, and for a moment I just stood there, letting the ache in my chest settle before I said softly, Dad. He turned, and when he saw me, his eyes, those kind, steady eyes, filled with tears that he didn't bother to wipe away. He stood opening his arms, and I walked into his hug, breathing in the scent of him, coffee pine, and safety. We stood there holding on to each other, letting the lake's quiet become the space we needed before we started speaking. Tyler told me everything he said finally, his voice rough breaking. I pulled back enough to see his face, to see the hurt and confusion there layered over the love that never left. I'm so sorry, Dad, I whispered. I thought you knew. I thought. He shook his head, swallowing hard. I know now. I'm so sorry, Liv. I can't believe I just can't believe it. We moved to the bench on the dock, sitting side by side, watching the morning sun start to burn off the mist over the water. For a while we didn't speak, just sat there, the silence, saying all the things we didn't know how to put into words. Then he turned to me, tears streaking down his weathered face. All those weeks I thought you didn't care. I thought I had done something to lose you. I couldn't understand how my little girl, the one who always called, always showed up, would just walk away. My chest ached as I reached for his hand. I never walked away, Dad. I was trying to give you something you've always wanted. He nodded, squeezing my hand, his shoulders shaking as he tried to keep himself together. You did, sweetheart. You did. And she took it from us. Behind us, footsteps crunched on the gravel, and I turned to see Tyler walking toward us, hands in his jacket pockets, his face pale but determined. Hey, he said quietly, sitting down on Dad's other side. For a moment, the three of us just sat there, watching the water, letting the morning birds fill the silence. I should have seen it, Dad said after a while. All those times she changed the subject, all those canceled conversations. I just thought she was being herself. I never thought she would lie to me. Not like this. Tyler ran a hand through his hair, letting out a shaky breath. She played all of us, Dad. Me, Rebecca, you. She wanted to control it all. But why? Dad's voice cracked, and he looked at us, searching our faces for answers we didn't fully have. And that was the question that sat heavy in the air between us. Because it wasn't just about a birthday party. It was about a lifetime of something deeper. Something we had all felt in small ways, but never fully seen until now. Dad wiped his face, his jaw setting in that quiet way I recognized from every time he decided to do something hard. We need to talk to her, all of us. No more secrets. I nodded, and so did Tyler, and in that moment, for the first time in a long time, I felt like we were a team again. That afternoon, we drove back to the house I had once called home. I felt my stomach knot as we pulled into the driveway, the weight of what we were about to do pressing down on my shoulders. Mom opened the door, her face falling when she saw us standing there together. She opened her mouth, probably ready to deliver some carefully rehearsed line, but Dad spoke first. We need to talk. Now. She hesitated, then stepped aside, letting us in. The house felt cold, too clean, like it was trying too hard to look perfect. We sat in the living room, Dad in his usual chair. Tyler and I on the couch, Mom across from us, her posture rigid. What is this about? She asked, her voice clipped. You know what this is about? Dad said, his voice calm but firm. She crossed her arms. Robert, I don't stop, Dad said, and the room went silent. We know. About the emails, the texts, the lies. We know. Her face paled, and for a moment I saw something flicker in her eyes. Fear. I don't know what you're talking about. She tried again, but her voice was shaking. Tyler leaned forward, his voice low. Mom, please. Don't lie anymore. We know. For a long moment, the only sound in the room was the ticking of the clock on the mantel. Then she exhaled, her shoulders slumping, her eyes filling with tears that spilled down her cheeks. I was scared, she whispered. Dad blinked, his jaw clenching. Scared of what? Caroline, she wiped her face with trembling hands, looking smaller than I had ever seen her. Scared of losing everything, of losing you, of becoming invisible. I felt the anger in my chest, but it was tangled with something else, a sadness I didn't want to feel. Why would you think you'd lose him? I asked softly. She looked at me, and for the first time in my life, I saw her walls crack. Because you've always been his favorite, Olivia. Always. You and him with your plans, your dreams, your little world that never included me. That's not true, Dad said, shaking his head, his voice breaking. Caroline, I loved you. I love you. You are my wife. But you don't look at me the way you look at her. She sobbed, and the words cut through the room like a blade. You never did. Silence. Painful, heavy, honest silence. She buried her face in her hands, crying, and for a moment none of us knew what to do. Dad leaned forward, his voice gentle but firm. What you did, Caroline, hurt us. It hurt Olivia. It hurt me. It hurt this family. She looked up, her face streaked with tears, and whispered, I know. And in that moment, the truth sat between us, undeniable and raw. Tyler cleared his throat. We can't go back to how things were, he said. But we can choose what happens next. Mom nodded, her shoulders shaking as she whispered, I need help. Dad took her hand, and I saw tears in his eyes. We'll get you help. I sat there looking at them, the parents who had raised me, the family that had hurt me, and I realized something I didn't expect. This wasn't the end. It was the beginning, a beginning born from pain and truth. Because sometimes the family you want isn't the family you have. But sometimes you get to choose to rebuild piece by piece. And that's exactly what we decided to do that day. Hey, say that healing isn't a straight line, that it's messy, uncomfortable, and never as quick as you want it to be. I didn't fully understand that until the weeks after that day in the living room when the truth had finally been spoken aloud, leaving us all raw and exposed with nowhere to hide. After the confrontation, we all sat in silence, the air thick with everything we couldn't say out loud. Mom wiped her face. Her mascara smudged her eyes red and tired. She looked like someone who had been holding her breath for years and was finally letting herself exhale. Dad was the first to speak, his voice soft but steady. We need space. All of us. Mom nodded, her eyes cast downward. I know. That afternoon, Dad packed a small bag, throwing in a few shirts, a couple of books, and his shaving kit, the same one he'd used for as long as I could remember. He turned to Mom before leaving, pressing a gentle kiss to her forehead, a promise without words. I'm going to stay at the condo near campus for a while, he told her. You need to focus on yourself, Caroline. And I need to think. She nodded again, tears slipping down her cheeks, but this time she didn't try to stop him. As he walked out the door, he looked back at me, and for a brief moment it felt like I was 6 years old again, standing in the hallway watching him leave for a business trip, clutching my stuffed bunny and trying not to cry. But this time I wasn't a child, and he wasn't leaving me. We were choosing a new path together. In the days that followed, everything felt quiet, like the house itself was holding its breath. Mom called me one evening, her voice tentative. I've found a therapist, she said. I start next week. There was a pause, and then she added, her voice breaking. I want to get better, Olivia. I want to be someone you and Tyler can trust. I didn't know what to say, so I just whispered, thank you. Because it wasn't forgiveness, not yet. But it was a step. Dad settled into the condo, sending me photos of the small lake view from his balcony, the books he was reading, the dinners he cooked for himself. He told me it felt strange living alone for the first time in 40 years, but that it also felt like a chance to breathe. We talked every day sometimes about nothing at all, sometimes about the heavy things that had weighed on our family for so long. There were tears in those conversations, but there was laughter too, a softness returning between us that had been overshadowed by hurt. One evening, about 2 weeks after everything had fallen apart, Dad called me, his voice calm, but filled with something I hadn't heard in a while, hope. Liv, I've been thinking, he said. About Italy. My breath caught. Dad. No, he interrupted gently. Listen, we can still go. You and me. Just us. There was a silence on the line as the idea settled between us, warm and comforting. You've spent 2 years planning this, he continued. You wanted to give me something beautiful, something I've dreamed of my whole life. I don't want to lose that, Liv. I don't want you to lose that. Tears filled my eyes as I whispered, Are you sure? He chuckled softly. Sweetheart, I've never been more sure of anything. That night, I reopened my laptop, pulling up the old plans I had saved, the spreadsheets, the itineraries, the list of places we wanted to see. I had closed all of this off, tucked it away like a wound I didn't want to reopen, but now it felt different. This wasn't about making a statement to the family anymore, or proving I could give him this gift. It was about us, Dad and me. A father and daughter reclaiming something that had been stolen, turning pain into something beautiful. The following week, we sat at Dad's small kitchen table in the condo, spreading out maps of Tuscany, flipping through the brochures I had once shown him months ago, before everything fell apart. His eyes lit up as he pointed at places on the map. Here's where Castellina is, he said. And look, Florence is just over here. We could rent a car drive through the countryside. I watched him, the way his hands moved, the excitement in his voice, and I felt something inside me heal piece by piece. We booked the flights together side by side, choosing seats by the window, so he could look out over the clouds, like he used to tell me he loved doing when he traveled for work. I rebooked a small apartment in Castellina, simpler than the villa I had originally planned, but perfect for just the two of us. A place with a small kitchen where we could try to cook pasta, a balcony that overlooked rolling hills of vineyards and olive groves. It felt right. When we told Tyler about the plan, he smiled, pulling me into a hug. "It should be you two," he said. "This was always your dream for him." Rebecca nodded, squeezing my hand. "Take lots of pictures," she said, tears in her eyes. Mom stayed quiet when she found out, her eyes flickering with something I couldn't quite read. Regret, sadness, maybe even a quiet acceptance. She didn't try to stop us, and for now that was enough. The day we left, Dad picked me up at dawn, coffee in hand, a smile on his face that made him look years younger. We loaded our bags into the car, and as we pulled away, he reached over, squeezing my hand. "Ready for an adventure?" he asked, his eyes twinkling. I smiled back, a real full smile that I hadn't felt in a long time. "With you, always." On the plane, he pulled out a small notebook, scribbling down Italian phrases he wanted to remember, practicing them under his breath, glancing at me with that mischievous grin when he butchered the pronunciation. "Grazie," he said over and over until he got it right. We laughed, we planned, we dreamed as the plane carried us over the ocean toward the place where his family's story had begun. For the first time in what felt like forever, I wasn't holding on to pain or anger. I wasn't trying to prove anything to anyone. I was just there, with him, and that was enough. They say healing isn't a straight line, and they're right. There would be more hard conversations ahead when we got back. More therapy sessions for Mom, more choices about what our family would look like moving forward. But as the plane began its descent over the rolling hills of Tuscany, the morning sun lighting up the vineyards below, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time: hope. Because this wasn't just a trip anymore. It was the start of something new. A father and daughter choosing to step into a new chapter. Together. They say that some journeys change you, but no one tells you how quietly those changes happen. How they slip in between moments of laughter, in the way your father's eyes light up as he tries to order espresso in broken Italian, or how the hills of Tuscany glow gold at dawn while you stand on a balcony beside him, breathing in a kind of peace you didn't know your heart could hold. Italy wasn't the trip I had planned. It was better. Dad and I landed in Rome, tired but giddy, laughing as we tried to navigate the rental car parking lot, arguing playfully about who would drive through the winding countryside roads. We ended up sharing the driving, taking turns as we made our way north toward Tuscany, stopping whenever something caught our eye: a roadside fruit stand, a small stone church, a vineyard with a handwritten sign that promised the best wine in the region. Each stop became a memory, Dad taking a sip of Chianti and closing his eyes with a soft the way he did when something truly made him happy. Me getting flour on my nose during a cooking class in a tiny village kitchen, while an elderly Italian woman laughed and patted my cheek, calling me Bella Ragazza, as Dad snapped photos, his grin so wide it made my heart hurt, in the best way. We visited Castellina, the village where his grandfather had been born. The streets were narrow and cobbled, lined with flower boxes, overflowing with red geraniums. We found the small records office where an old man named Marco, who smelled like tobacco and olive oil, pulled out faded ledgers with names scribbled in looping handwriting. Dad traced his finger over the name Antonio Walsh, written in the ledger, his eyes glistening. "This is him," he whispered. "This is where it started." And I stood beside him, holding his hand, feeling the weight of that moment, the generations before us, the sacrifices made, the dreams carried across oceans, so that we could stand here now, free to choose our lives. One Sunday, we were invited to lunch with distant cousins who still lived in the area, the Ritchie family, who maintained the same olive grove Antonio's brother had stayed behind to care for. We sat at a long table under a pergola draped in grapevines, sunlight filtering through green leaves, as children ran barefoot around us, their laughter ringing like bells. They brought out dish after dish: fresh bread, cured meats, cheeses, tomatoes that tasted like sunshine pasta, with sauce that had simmered all morning. Dad tried to keep up with the Italian chatter, using the phrases he had practiced on the plane, making everyone laugh with his earnest attempts. At one point, Giovanni, the patriarch of the family, raised his glass. "To family," he said in English, smiling at us. Dad lifted his glass, turning to me with tears in his eyes, and repeated softly, "To family." We clinked glasses, and in that moment, surrounded by people who shared our blood but not our language, I felt connected to something bigger, something that stretched backward through time, and forward into whatever would come next. The nights in Tuscany were quiet in a way that cities never are. We would sit on our small balcony sipping wine we bought from a local vineyard, watching the sky fade from gold to pink to deep velvet blue. The stars came out slowly, one by one, and Dad would point them out to me, naming constellations like he used to do when I was a kid, lying on the grass in our backyard. We talked about everything on those nights, about his childhood, about my childhood, about the mistakes we had made, and the things we wished we could change, about Mom, and how complicated love could be, how forgiveness didn't mean forgetting, but choosing to move forward anyway. "I'm proud of you, Liv," he said one night, his voice rough with emotion. "I'm proud of the woman you've become." Tears filled my eyes, and I looked at him, seeing not just my father, but a man who had lived, who had hurt, who had loved deeply. "I'm proud of you too, Dad." When we returned to the States, it felt like coming back from a dream, but instead of feeling sad, I felt full of gratitude, of hope, of the quiet certainty that we had healed something between us that had been waiting for years. Tyler was waiting at the airport, holding a sign that said, "Welcome home, world travelers," with Rebecca laughing beside him. He pulled me into a hug that was tight and real, the kind of hug that said, "I'm sorry, and I'm here." Over the next few weeks, Tyler and I found our rhythm again. We started meeting for coffee on Sundays, something small but important, sharing stories about work, about life, about the family we were trying to rebuild. One Sunday, he admitted, "I should have believed you, Liv." "I'm sorry I didn't." I smiled, squeezing his hand across the table. "We're here now. That's what matters." And it was. Mom was quieter when we saw her, but there was a softness to her that hadn't been there before. Therapy wasn't a magic fix, but it was helping. She started to listen more, to speak less with sharpness and more with honesty. One evening, she invited Dad, Tyler, Rebecca, and me over for dinner. It was simple: roast chicken, mashed potatoes, a salad. But it was the first time we had all sat around a table together in months, without tension pressing on our shoulders. Halfway through dinner, Mom cleared her throat, her hands shaking slightly. "I know I have a long way to go," she said, looking around at us. "But I want to say thank you for giving me the chance to try." Dad reached over, taking her hand, and I saw the way she looked at him, tears in her eyes, something like hope shining there. And for the first time, I believed that maybe we could be okay. Life didn't become perfect overnight. We still had hard days, still had moments where the past tried to creep back in, but now we faced it together with honesty and softness that we hadn't known how to give each other before. Dad printed out a photo of us standing in the olive grove in Tuscany, the hills rolling out behind us, both of us smiling with the kind of joy that comes from healing. He framed it and put it on his desk at work, telling me it reminded him of what mattered when days were hard. Whenever I saw it, I felt that warmth again, a reminder of what we had reclaimed. They say family is complicated, and it is. But it's also worth fighting for. Not fighting to pretend everything is perfect, but fighting to be honest, to heal, to grow, to forgive. Italy didn't just give Dad and me memories. It gave us the chance to rewrite the story of our family, to choose love and truth over silence and secrets. And as we sat together one evening, the five of us sharing stories and laughter, I realized that sometimes the most beautiful endings come after the hardest chapters, because healing is possible, because love is stronger than fear, because family chosen and rebuilt can be the most beautiful thing of all. If you've listened this far, thank you. I know it wasn't an easy story to hear because it wasn't an easy story to live. I used to think that family meant keeping quiet to keep the peace. That if you loved someone, you swallowed your feelings, you looked the other way, you let things slide, because that's what families do. You let the secrets stay hidden and you keep pretending everything is fine. But I've learned that real family isn't about pretending. Real family is about honesty even when it hurts. It's about choosing truth over comfort, courage over silence, and forgiveness over resentment. And it's about showing up again and again, even when it's messy, even when you're scared. When my mother looked me in the eyes and told me I wasn't welcome at my dad's birthday, it felt like my world shattered. I remember sitting in my car that day, clutching the steering wheel, trying to understand how someone who was supposed to love me could push me away so easily. I didn't know then that this was the breaking point we needed, that sometimes things have to break so they can be rebuilt, that sometimes the worst moments lead to the most beautiful transformations. If you had told me back then that my family would sit around a dinner table months later sharing stories and laughter, that my mother would look at me with tears in her eyes and say, "I'm trying," I would have told you it was impossible. If you had told me that I would walk the streets of my great-grandfather's village in Tuscany with my dad, that we would stand under the warm Italian sun and feel connected to something bigger than ourselves, I would have told you it was a dream. But it wasn't a dream. It was the result of choosing truth even when it hurt, of choosing to fight for what mattered even when it was easier to walk away, of choosing to believe that even the deepest wounds can heal if you're willing to face them with open eyes and an open heart. I won't lie to you and say everything is perfect now. My family is still learning how to communicate. My mother is still in therapy, working through the layers of hurt she's carried for years. There are days when old patterns try to creep back in when it would be easier to shut down or to pretend things are fine when they're not. But we are choosing not to pretend anymore. We are choosing to talk, to listen, to apologize, and to try again. We are choosing each other. And that's what matters. If you're listening to this and you feel like your family is too broken to fix, I want you to know I understand. I know what it's like to feel like you're the outsider, like you're the problem, like you're the one who cares too much while everyone else looks the other way. I know what it's like to feel tired of trying, tired of caring, tired of hoping. But I also know that healing is possible, that change is possible, that families can grow even after deep hurt if people are willing to be honest, to take responsibility, and to do the hard work of healing. Maybe your story doesn't look like mine. Maybe your family can't heal in the same way, and that's okay. Sometimes the healthiest thing you can do is to let go, to walk away, to build your own peace. But if there's even a chance that healing is possible, I want you to know it's worth trying. Because love is worth it. Truth is worth it. You are worth it. As I record this, I'm sitting in my small apartment in Chicago, a cup of coffee, next to me, the framed photo of my dad and me in Tuscany on my desk. When I look at that photo, I see so much more than a trip. I see a promise kept. I see a father and daughter choosing each other, choosing to fight for the relationship we both wanted, even when it would have been easier to let the pain win. I see the reminder that even when things fall apart, they can be rebuilt. Maybe not the same, but stronger, deeper, and more honest. If you've listened to this story and it's touched something in you, I would love to hear your story. Have you ever experienced a moment when everything fell apart, only to discover it was the start of something better? Have you ever felt like the outsider in your own family, and did you find a way back? Have you ever chosen to fight for truth and love, even when it was hard? Share your story in the comments below. I promise I will read them, and I know you never know who might need to read your words too. If this story resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe to this channel. It helps us keep sharing stories of truth, courage, and healing with others who need it. And if you believe like I do that families can change, that healing is possible, and that love is worth fighting for, share this video with someone who needs to hear it. Because you never know, the story you share today might be the light someone else needs in their darkest moment. Thank you for being here, for listening, for caring. And wherever you are, whatever your story is, I hope you know this. You are not alone. Your story matters. And you deserve a life filled with truth, love, and healing. Take care of yourself, and I'll see you in the next story.